Welcome to Electrolysis Unplugged, an after-hours chat beyond the probe with Joanie and Stephanie. We're here to dive deep into the world of electrolysis, education, and all things hair removal.
Whether you're a seasoned professional or just curious about the art of permanent hair removal, we've got the insights, tips, and fun stories to keep you plugged in.
So grab your tools, take a seat, and let's get into it. This is Electrolysis Unplugged, brought to you by the Electrology Education Coalition. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Okay, so tonight we have invited Patricio, and they are from Hawaii, and they are with HISIS. And I did kind of a long introduction the other day about you on here, but why don't you tell us what brought you to Electrology and like about who you are from your perspective? It's a good starting point.
That's kind of weird question. It's a lot of things. So I'll just start with kind of where I started. I have a master's in public health. My goal has always been to kind of reduce health disparities among marginalized communities, decolonize health, that kind of stuff. And so I've actually worked in HIV for 25 years. Along with that comes a lot of LGBT work, and that's primarily what it is. And recently, because of the increase in trans folks who are acquiring HIV at a higher rate, that has become more trans health focused. Well, we know as public health that we can't just focus on one thing in a person. We can't just say, well, stop getting HIV. It's not going to work. We have to holistically look at the entirety of the person. And so that was part of what brings me here, is that back in 2018, I was approached by an organization to do a trans health navigation program. And so I don't know if you're familiar, but Kaiser Permanente, the health system that is Kaiser in Hawaii, and I think in like Northern California, has a trans health navigation program that is completely enclosed inside of their kind of Kaiser ecosphere. And so we were trying to model it after that because it is, to be fair, I'm not trying to promote Kaiser in any way, but it is one of the best ecosystems for this specific thing. The only negative side about it is behavioral health is not accessible a lot of times through Kaiser. However, in a federally qualified health center, which is health centers that are aimed at reducing health disparities, specifically among urban and rural populations and things like that, we have all of that on site, including a lot of us have dental, there's, healthcare, all of it. And so we were ultimately the ecosystem, that is Kaiser, except we accepted everyone. And you didn't even have to make a lot of money either. Like that's the other thing too is, we would make sure you got insurance and things like that. So that's the purpose of a FQHC. Throughout that, we had meeting after meeting after meeting, as you do, because that's how things get done, apparently. But we had all these meetings, and finally, we just kept talking about electrology. We don't have any electrologists. In Hawaii, there are 13 active licenses as of last year. There are 4 of us who are actively practicing that I can honestly tell you. There was 6, 2 of them have now left. The neighbor islands have nobody. We're all on Oahu, and we're literally, funny story, we're all actually in like a 4-block radius right now. So the other 2 other electrologists are like down the street in the same building, and one is in another place. We also have an electrologist on island who's unlicensed, but that's a whole nother thing. We are a licensed state. We do require a license. But, so we all have these kind of things. But the reality was is that we had no electrologist doing this. And we have the nation's largest population of trans Mahu people in the US. So the biggest thing about that was I made some joke that was like, well, if I can't find someone else to do it, I'll do it myself. Well, that actually turned into, yeah, go ahead and do it yourself. So in 2020, I actually went to school in California, and that's where I was. And during the pandemic, I had to lived in Orange County for 2 months and finished the program, and um, came back and we started this, and I started as a part-time gig because I had a full-time job, obviously running 2 homeless shelters, an HIV program, all sorts of things, and did this part-time to the point where now I'm full-time, and I went from having 30 clients to 130 clients in less than 6 months. I currently have 175. I'm the only person. Um, and that includes cosmetic or medically necessary. My focus is medically necessary. I try not to take on so many cosmetic clients because it does take up a lot of time for me. Um, so that's kind of where I started, and I kind of just like showed up, and I'm doing this now. It's not a field I'm 100% familiar with, but it does have a lot of aspects of healthcare in it. And so that's what, my focus is really the healthcare part of this.
One of the things that when you were talking about that, so as you and I have talked about in the past, like I now have primary care adjacent to my practice, and we're trans health focused and PCOS hair as well. But that's more along the lines of like we found a way to make it happen. And one of the interesting things, the FQHC that you were just talking about, because our town, our region already has an FQHC, they will not allow trans health to be outside of that for your state insurance stuff. And that's because they say that our region already has one, but they are not trans friendly.
Mm.
And so they're literally forcing the patients into spaces that ignite problems over anything else. So I think that that is one of those interesting factors about your background, because it's something I deal with public health, local public health all the time now. And it blows my mind where the lack of care is happening. Recently, Joanie and myself, we are working with Oregon Trans Health Committee. It's a subcommittee for electrolysis in regards to accessible care for patients, and making sure that people are properly trained. As some of you might know, depending on where you're from, recently, like Oregon shifted how they approve license to 4 different pathways. And so being an unlicensed state myself, I was able to get into that because I was able to meet the equivalency. But in doing so, they had almost no one to train unless people were training their own employees and proctoring their own employees. And so that kind of breeds a lack of transparency. And that's a big fear for a lot of patients as well. So I love hearing this stuff that you're talking about. But thank you for sharing that with us, because when you said that, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is why. This is why we all talk.
And the reason why I started doing this full time, just as full disclosure, I was discriminated against by my federally qualified health center, and I ended up having to sue them. So, they're not the greatest, but they're great in the fact that they're medical centers that help folks who have less, access. And trans health is something that is just really hard to come by in the United States, regardless of the state and their ideologies. So, I mean, Hawaii requires it by law. You're supposed to have it, including electrolysis, but getting it covered one is ridiculous. And I mean, I literally had to go to Congress over it. So, it's those types of things that it's like, I absolutely understand and see how your governor can actually declare you a FQHC if you want. I'll
We're
tell you
actually
how to do
trying for
that.
that right now. Yeah, like
I
no,
was like, your governor can actually say, yes, we want this. So,
and we are 25 minutes from the Capitol where we planted ourselves, which is very convenient for trying to advocate with our local Congress people and our governor. And we are actually in the process of that. So
good. Yeah.
I'm like, well, both Patricio and I are like really ignited by what we see happening within the W path. So why don't you talk about what you're doing with W path? I think that's like
Sure.
a great opportunity
And
to
maybe talk about what WPATH is, just in case
yes.
Sure.
somebody does not know.
So WPATH is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. It is the kind of body that releases the standards of care. So like an American Board of Pediatricians, that's what WPATH really kind of is, except they don't have board status. And so they don't really certify physicians or anything like that, but there is a kind of like global education initiative as well, that includes educating surgeons and primary care and all sorts of everyone in trans health. Because of course, trans health spans from gender affirming care down to the very, you know, hormones and the side effects that they can have, especially on livers and brain aneurysms and stuff like that. So it is really cardiology to whatever, and surgery and all of that. There is a section called non-surgical body modification, which is where electrolysis falls under. And each country actually does have like not each country, I shouldn't say that. Each like region does have their own kind of path. So we have US Path here. I currently sit on the board of US Path, which is the US version of WPATH. And so we kind of look at what's going on in the United States and try to stand out and educate people. Um, there's a lot going on in the world around trans health. There's a lot going on in the United States around trans health. It's a disaster, to be very frank. And a lot of the information you're being fed is false and wrong. Um, WPATH is a scientific organization, so their first and foremost, their purpose is to create scientific standards of care that align with what we know to be true through, various research. And that care is throughout the lifespan, from adolescence to adulthood. And so these standards of care are available for free on the WPATH website. You can go in and look at them. One thing about WPATH, though, is under hair removal, it just kind of says electrolysis or laser, whichever one. And the reason for that is because we don't really have a lot of scientific research, in terms of longitudinal studies, so long-term studies about how hair growth happens in somebody who's had gender affirming bottom surgery and things like that. And so some of that information is actually going to be coming down the pipeline within the next year, which is amazing, but we do need more definitive research to say electrology is the gold standard. It is the one that's going to prevent the intravaginal hair the most, and that we need to definitively say that is what it basically I'm trying to push as a narrative. And everyone can join WPATH. You can either join as a provider or a supporter. As an electrologist, I think you are a provider. I think they do consider you to be a provider, so you're a full member with voting rights. And so you do have you do have a voice, and I would love to have a larger voice for those of us who are doing things like tattooing, and electrology and laser and kind of what people consider to be aesthetics, which are medically necessary aesthetics, as a part of WPATH so that we can become part of that standard of care, and we can actually, as the professionals doing it, say, these are the standards of care. Because when you go to a dermatologist and ask, oh, should I get laser electrolysis? They're going to say laser because it's right down the hall and it makes them money. That's the biggest thing that what I look at in public health is we're still, as public health practitioners, and we're still part of an oppressive system. That's the end of the day. We're part of a system that is made for white, cisgendered, heterosexual men, and the rest of us are just out there. And so within that system, we have to move and work and things like that. And so that's how these organizations end up working. So like with dermatologists and stuff, because in the United States, we are a fee for service program, basically for health. All we care about is that fee for service. And dermatology is a very big moneymaker. I mean, very big moneymaker. Um, so, I mean, in Hawaii, we're required to have a letter for trans folks that says that laser doesn't work for them because one person read an article that wasn't even a real scientific article. It was an opinion piece that said laser was superior. And but it was based in terms of time, not terms of hair removal. Just it was superior in how long it took and how much pain was felt. That's it. And so they took that and ran with it. And I cannot find a dermatologist to write that letter because they refuse. And so it's those types of things, because if they write that letter, they can get in trouble with the insurance company, or the insurance company can retaliate. There's no laws preventing that. So the US is kind of a trash system in terms of health, unfortunately, but we do get a lot of folks, we do get insurance here. I have been fighting for the last 3 years with the insurance companies. I cornered the CEO of that major insurance company that has the weird letter rule. So we're out here, and sometimes you just have to do it. Like I said before, I actually literally had to go to our congressman. I had to write to every member of the Veterans Affairs committees to finally get the VA on board. And so we finally literally just got that, I think, either the end of last year or the beginning of this year. And so it's been an uphill battle. And we don't even know, depending on the next president, we don't know what that's going to even look like, if TransCare is even going to be a part of that. So, yeah.
In the chat, just so everybody knows, I dropped in the WPATH SOC 8. It's the current standards for WPATH. It is very reasonably priced to become a member. And in fact, I accidentally let my membership lapse, and you just reminded me till I made a note as you were talking to go and update mine. And I will say that the more electrologists that we have in these spaces, especially like with the textbook that we just had come out in regards to trans healthcare, in electrolysis and laser, and understanding it, I think that's very important. Because as a dually trained technician myself, I mean, of course I had success cases, but you stop it at a certain point with laser because dormancy is such a high factor. So I love hearing that you guys are studying that further. And I am of the old generation when it comes to laser and electrolysis. And I was that generation where you had to choose one camp for a while. And I started off with laser and I added in electrolysis. And the reason I did that was because you only can get so far with some people. And especially when it's intervaginal and interurethral. I mean, the amount of trans men that I've had to give the unfortunate news to that they have interurethral hair growth. And there's very little. I mean, I will say that you can do laser to keep it at bay, but once you jump the gun on surgical procedures, that's it. And there's no spelunking to get that out of there.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. Like, that's something that has come up a couple of times in meetings with healthcare professionals during the WPATH. We just had that US Path symposium this past November in Denver. Sorry, I was like, where did I just go? So, but yeah, it's one of those things where, like, yeah, until we develop something that can do intravaginal something like laser, then you're kind of stuck with it. The only option at that point is to undo the vaginoplasty, get rid of the hair again, and then redo the vaginoplasty. And the way to get rid of the hair is through something called follicle scraping, which is where they just take the flap of skin and scrape the follicles off the back. That is pretty much, and they do that prior to the vaginoplasty as well. Again, it's not 100%, which is why electrolysis is such a wonderful option, because you're killing off enough hair that they can go in and do that. However, the more follicle scraping that happens, the tissue becomes thinner, you become less likely to have enough tissue. You're more at risk for hospital-based infection at that point. I mean, it becomes a whole thing. And it's funny because I bring this up when I speak to insurance companies that, hey, look, you're going to end up paying twice as much for revision, and also the infections that will follow, and stuff like that. So there's just a lot going in there. And WPATH, for one, has, created these wonderful standards. They're on number 8. So they've been doing this since the 70s. And so like they change. Of course, medicine changes, electrology changes, and so I keep trying to let people know like electrology's been around longer than anything else. It is the oldest form of electroablation in existence. And it's literally only changed maybe 2 or 3 times in terms of the procedure. We've added on some new technology, of course, with multi-needle machines and things, but like it's been 150 some years of the same thing, just the same thing. And that should speak for itself. You know, there's a study that shows that laser has about an 80% return rate of hair after 5 to 10 years. So there are things out there that, and that's of course just one small study, and we can't base everything on that, but that's just an indication of there is going to be return of hair. And if it's intravaginally, while it's not medically unsound to have intravaginal hair, it's also probably not comfortable. It's not psychologically sound. And there is a risk of infection, ingrown hairs and things of that nature. So,
If you, because I know since working in public health, one of the big questions I had was, I notice, especially in unlicensed states and unlicensed places, we lack ability to find infection prevention standards that are equivalent to electrology. If you were to cherry pick programs for members and non-members alike to go after and dive into, where, because of the public health side, this is what I think about, where would you say that electrologists should be going if it's not at a convention? Because sometimes it's there and then sometimes it's there, but it's not 100% on topic. It's more like cosmetology based. So where are you seeing the best benefits in that education? One. And two, because of medicine advancing all the time, how frequently are you having your students redo their infection prevention certifications?
so infection prevention is huge. This is one of my areas of expertise, specifically around bloodborne pathogens. Because of HIV, I've had to learn it 100 million ways. And so first and foremost, bloodborne pathogens is number one to me. It will always be number one. Granted, we don't really encounter blood that often. I always joke with my students that if an electrologist tells you that they've never made someone bleed, they're lying. Because it happens, and we're all prepared to deal with that. We're hopefully all wearing gloves. We're hopefully, have our alcohol and things of that nature. So just that bloodborne pathogen, knowing how to handle that, knowing what is transmittable. HIV outside the body doesn't last. However, hepatitis does. And that's more of a concern than, making sure you're in having your vaccines and things like that. So those are the big things that I kind of hit home with a lot of. Hand washing is the number one way to eliminate the risk of spreading of infection. And so that's another big thing. That's free. You can find that online anywhere. You can buy apps on your phone. Your watch will tell you how to, if you have an Apple Watch, you can set a time thing that it's a whole thing. Wash your hands. Wash your hands a lot. So that's the biggest thing. And then when you're washing your hands, also wash under your nails. Make sure that you're washing your hands fully. That's actually something my students have to learn. Up front, you learn surgical hand washing. Because my mother's a surgeon, I learned that at a very young age. It has stuck with me. So, my students have to learn that up front, and then they learn the differences between what 70% alcohol does versus what 90% alcohol does, and those kind of nuanced things. I think a lot of the electrology books that are out there, I think a lot of the cosmetology books that are out there really hit it and really get it right. Um, Except for the old hair removal one from Milady's, not the new one, but the older one had some things that I was like, "Oh, that's not right." So, they at one point they called a virus like a parasite, and I was like, "Those are 2 very different things," but all right. But the new book does get it right. So if you have access to that, that's the curriculum that we use now. When it came out, we jumped on that because it was such a really great resource, and it has really wonderful videos. I think there's even a hand washing video in that too. So, thank you so much for that, by the way. So those are the types of things. The other things that I kind of also tell people to look for, you need to make sure that you understand the signs of a stroke. That sounds really weird, but people have strokes all the time. People who are on hormones are more at risk for having a stroke. The risk is smaller than, people who are using cocaine, for instance, but, you never know. But you also have people in your chair that are probably using cocaine. Like those are types of things that you need to think about beyond hygiene, I should say. So recognizing what a heart attack looks like, recognizing what a stroke looks like, because if you're laying someone back and they have congestive heart failure, you're actually contributing to that because there's fluid building up around the lungs. And so those are the types of things that you have to kind of think about. They're not as important, of course, but the other thing too is the 3-step clean, sterilize, sanitize, sterilize. That is the biggest thing I teach. Everything needs to be cleaned. We use an ultrasonic cleaner because in Hawaii, for some reason, that is the only thing they talk about in our law, is that we have to have an ultrasonic cleaner. I use mine with a protein antagonist, which is just something that kills off any kind of protein like blood, hair, that kind of stuff. You can literally put soap in there for all it cares. You don't have to put anything, to be honest with you. That's the whole point of them. Then we sanitize with barbicide because it's the only thing we can get on this island, because they don't ship liquids to us. And then the other thing is too, we have a sterilizer. So I have an old school regular hospital sterilizer that fell off the back of a truck, and it works perfectly. So, those are the types of things we use. I know that most people may not have access or can afford a sterilizer, but that sanitation part of it, and then putting them in pouches. If you have to stop at sanitation, put your instruments inside of the sterilizer pouches, just so that things aren't collecting dust, things like that. The more exposed they are, the more likely you are to expose it to things like mold. Um, we do this really cool thing where I make them take cotton swabs and agar and swab things, and then we grow what bacteria is on there. And so I make them do things like their probe holders, make them do things like the chairs, things like that. And it's really shocking to them that even though they've cleaned it, there's still stuff sitting there, which proves to them, hey, you need to, and the other thing too is I even leave one open and just not touching anything. It just lets the air, and just within the air itself, we can show that there's mold, there's, all sorts of various things that are flying around. So we don't work in sterile environments. No one expects us to. The reducing the risk of infection. One thing I do want to bring up though is witch hazel. Witch hazel seems to be some sort of industry standard, and I don't grasp where it came from. Witch hazel has no antiseptic properties whatsoever. It is really good to prevent scabbing, so that's a really great thing, but it's not a cleaner at all. As a matter of fact, it's not even going to do much. So you need to really clean the skin with something like isopropyl alcohol after you've completed the session. And it has to be 70%. And the reason for that is because 70% isopropyl alcohol has less water. Has more water, I should say. And so it's longer to dry. It takes longer for it to dry out. And that means that it can actually kill things in that longer period. Things like 90% alcohol, they just evaporate too quickly. And isopropyl alcohol can be used on everything, including electronic equipment, because of the fact that it doesn't have so much water. Now, don't go pouring it inside of anything, but you can use it. But yeah, so those are the types of things that I would look at. I would just say, bloodborne pathogens, first aid if you can, because you just, knock on wood, never know what's going to happen in that chair. So
Today, we want to shine some light on some of our amazing partners who are helping shape the future of electrology education, services, distribution, and so much more. We're thrilled to have such amazing partners and supporters. Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned professional, these vendors and schools have what you need to succeed. Hey there, hair removal heroes. It's time to mark your calendars. This June, the Electrology Education Coalition is bringing you the seminar event of the year. Join us for 3 transformative days of advanced learning, connection, and inspiration, designed by electrologists for electrologists. Whether you are just out of school or decades into your practice, this seminar is your chance to level up. We're diving into cutting-edge technologies, case studies, and real-world solutions for today's treatment room challenges. You'll meet leaders in the electrolysis and laser hair removal industry, explore emerging sciences, and walk away with confidence, community, and CEUs. So what are you waiting for? Learn more and register at electrologycoalition.com. We look forward to seeing you this year at the AES June Seminar in Las Vegas.
Heading to the Golden State, California Electrology Academy offers an immersive learning experience that prepares students for national certification as well as many states with reciprocity to California's licensing exams. Led by Joanie and Joanne Gonella, they bring decades of quality services and education. CEA offers flexible schedules, open enrollment, and a supportive learning environment, making them a perfect place to start your electrology journey. Be sure to check them out for cutting-edge education right in sunny Southern California. And visit electrologyacademy.com. That's electrologyacademy.com.
Zapmaster Electrology is located in the Pacific Northwest in Centralia, Washington. Stephanie Shields and her Zaplings lead the charge with award-winning education. Whether you're just starting out or looking to deepen your expertise, Zapmaster offers hands-on training, online theory courses, and so much more. And don't forget their distribution center. Led by Michael Shields, this is your one-stop shop for high-quality tools, products in electrology, aesthetics, laser hair removal, and so much more. Ready to enhance your practice? Visit thezapmaster.com. That is thezapmaster.com, and discover the resources awaiting for you.
Thanks for tuning in to Electrolysis Unplugged. Be sure to check out our amazing sponsors for the best in electrology tools, training, technology, and so much more. Now, back to the show.
I was actually curious about, so HISIS is a nonprofit, correct?
Yes.
And so can you talk a little bit about, why a nonprofit? What are you doing with HISIS as far as like the state goes and all of that?
Sure. So HISIS is actually short for Hawaii Electrolysis. That's kind of where we came up with the name. For some reason, people can't say our name. It's really weird. Like they always want to spell it out. And I'm like, it's HISIS. It's fine. We are the nation's only nonprofit dedicated to hair removal, and we're actually now a men's spa. So we now offer services beyond hair removal that align with trans health. So our goal really is to help folks who are needing access to medically necessary hair removal. So that being folks who are looking to transition, folks living with PCOS or Cushing's syndrome, anyone whose physician says this is medically necessary for whatever reason. We do not question it. We just ask that a physician send us a form that says, I say it's medically necessary. In that, if we cannot get insurance to cover it, which is most of the case for folks with PCOS and stuff like that, we offer it at a really reduced rate. So we only charge $50 an hour for those folks. And that is literally just the price that keeps the lights on. That doesn't include any pay or anything like that. To be 100% honest with you, I actually haven't gotten a paycheck in 2 years doing this. And so this is why we're doing it, is because it's a community focused thing. It's needed. We're not here for the money, obviously. And I realize that can't be everyone's. I have a lot of privilege in the fact that I can sustain myself a little bit with other other ventures and stuff like that. So HISIS's whole theory is that we're just here to do what needs to be done, and we're going to be the people that walk the walk and talk the talk. We see a lot of trans organizations out there that claim to be healthcare that just aren't doing the work. You have to put in the work, and that's what it is. And for electrologists specifically who serve trans folks, regardless of how much you charge them, you're putting in that work, because do you know how hard it is for someone to get waxing services who's trans? Just waxing. I sat and listened to a friend of mine call 13 separate waxing salons and ask them, "Do you see women?" Yes. "Do you see men?" Yes. "But we don't see trans women." Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And it's just, you see folks with penises, you see folks with vaginas, nothing's gonna change just because someone may have one with breasts. But anyway, as a whole side note, but we're putting in the work, and that's what we're about. Yes, we have kind of this aspiration to become gender doulas, because in Hawaii, we have to send everyone to the continent to get gender affirming care. We just got a gender affirming surgeon on island. However, she works at one hospital, and Kaiser still sends people to San Francisco, LA, that kind of stuff. And so it takes about 4 weeks for that process to happen, like to get the gender affirming care and do all the follow-ups is 4 weeks off island. And so you have to have someone that goes with you. And so one of the things we really want to do is find money somewhere to train someone in first aid, to train someone in all of these things that could possibly go wrong, and go with that person to care for that person, so someone of their family doesn't also have to take 4 weeks off. And so those are the types of things that we're looking towards the future. We're considering offering trans healthcare. There are some folks in town that offer it. We're just kind of weighing our options at this point to see what we can get the funding from and things like that. Our doula program is something that we've been building for a while. We're just really trying to find someone to give us money for it, unfortunately. So, but we also are going to be traveling. We're going to have a traveling electrologist. So, as you all know, Hawaii is an island chain, and so there are 8 inhabitable islands, and only one of them has electrology care. So everyone comes to us, and it is a pain in the butt to have everyone from Big Island come over, and Maui, and schedule all those people, and at the same time have some time for myself. There are days I'm working 10 to 12 hours a day just to accommodate people, because that's what's needed, because they're coming from another island. Um, and so I guess I'm now the only person who's open on the weekends, apparently. So that was the biggest thing. It's one of the reasons why we also opened the school. We have the Hawaii Institute of Electrolysis, and we're training with 4 people training. Actually, 2 of them just finished, I think. We're waiting to see if they can get the licensing test. Hawaii is a very weird state. We're about 4 years behind 1995 at this point. So everything is done by paper. Still, you can't apply for anything online. You have to just go and show up places. So it's nice because you get to meet a lot of people, but it's annoying. And it takes them about 22 days for them to even return to say, like, no, you can't take the test, or yes, you can. So yeah, so we're trying, but we're actually going to be traveling out to the other islands. So we're going to have a traveling circus, basically, of electrologists, and we're trying to design a mobile unit at this point. Big Island is called Big Island because it is very large. It is about 2 hours from one side to the other, and there's 2, like Kona and Hilo are the 2 major hubs. But the island has, of course, people living everywhere. It is separated by a giant volcano as well, so that's always fun. But, that's the other thing, is we're trying to design a mobile unit to see how we can achieve, like, meeting people where they are as well.
When you talk about funding, one of the things after this call, I do have a local nonprofit that works within BIPOC marginalized communities that is always looking to donate out large sums of money. So we'll connect again there.
Oh,
In the same token, when it comes to accessible care for everyone, you and I know that we're all about that life. I actually have a list of a sizable amount of ICD-10 codes that are getting approved for those who are not seeking gender affirming care, and diagnosis codes, so that we can help in that way. So we'll reconnect in that space because that's what I've been working on my side. So we can like help all the people.
Right. Do it all. Do it all. And that's kind of the thing though, is like trans care and even care, just healthcare in general is so grassroots in every way. You know, it's we have a public health workforce that is so inundated with nonsense. And I hate to say that out loud, but we get bogged down with a lot of what CDC can and cannot say. Like the president of the United States governs what the CDC can say. That's highly inappropriate. It's highly unethical in public health spaces. You know, the president of the United States should not have a say in what scientifically based, evidence-based information we're putting out there. You know, one big example is under Bush, we couldn't talk about condoms, and we saw an increase in HIV rates. You know, so it's those types of things where like government should not be governing public health in that way. Um, you know, and with the pandemic, we saw a lot of this. We saw a lot of, you know, people rebelling against things or not quite grasping the concept of what public health is and what jurisdictions we really have, in terms of showing up places. Like CDC can't just show up. They have to be invited. And it's the same with the state health department. The state health department just can't show up at your door. They have to be invited. Now, that's not 100% true, and if you've done something wrong, they're going to show up, but they usually send the Department of Justice. So those are the types of things that, like, yeah, it's tough, but you know, we do have to kind of share on a grassroots level what we need to do. And I think that's what's really critical. And one thing I find about electrology in general is that people are so willing to kind of share this knowledge and to share different things. Like on the Facebook groups and stuff like that, I know there's a lot of like drama about anonymous posts these days, but those anonymous posts are actually really great in the fact that like some people are allowed to ask questions without the fear of being, you know, whatever, you know, yelled at, whatever. They're still getting yelled at, but without somebody knowing who they are. But that's the thing, is there's just such a beautiful community around this. That's something that we don't see a lot of that, especially in medical care.
I, for one, love the anonymous posts. And the reason I love it is there are so many people that have not ever had access to education, realizing the importance of said access, that if we
Mhm.
shut them down and tell them that they're like, I've seen like some really harsh words thrown at anonymous posters. And I get it. It's like, you want to know, like, who's out there doing this? Okay. But in the same space, so many people had like their electrologist,
Mhm.
was trained by their electrologist, and I'm putting quotes up there, because no one was ever formally trained.
Right.
And
Right.
that's, if we can continue those open conversations, and this is why like Joanie and I have this, is like there are so many people that are um, eager to learn in a
Mhm.
safe space that ignites their brain and makes change.
Yeah.
And like I know the three of us love like research and like number crunching and like all that kind of stuff. And it gets exciting because it's like there has been a long gap with none of that. I mean, our last major research was Schuster in like what, 92?
Yeah.
Um, and where, and you can't even access that information anymore.
Yeah, no, and that's the other thing too. A lot of that information is also behind a paywall. You know, if you're not connected to the academy in any way, like to universities, you can't access that, and that's hard. You know, and we have no national standards per se. I know American Electrology Association has what their ethics or whatever their guide, but there needs to be more of a definitive scientific standard. Um, you know, and so because I assume most people who are showing up to these, you know, talks and things like that are one trained or been in the business for a long time. And so that's something that, you know, we have a lot of weird um Pacific Northwest and Hawaii have a very weird exchange. I don't know what's going on there, but we send people back and forth all the time. And people always ask me, well, who in Washington do you think I should go to? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, yeah, there's only one person I know in Washington who I would send anyone to. You know what I mean? It's like there's only one person in Southern California. And so those are the types of things it's like I can look up on the AEA website, but that doesn't tell me much of anything, you know? Um, and so that's just kind of one of those things too, is like I would love to see some national standards come out of, especially maybe your organization. The two of you have such a wealth of knowledge and such a history that like it would be wonderful to see, definitive things. We're currently working on a trans health certification for electrologists so that we can actually have a website that says, here are the people we know who've gone through this. We know we've trained them. Now we're not going to guarantee 100% that they're great at anything, but they have the knowledge, and so that's the biggest thing. The other thing, just to kind of plug this really quick, I just finished writing a book on trans aesthetic care. And so, yeah, I took y'all's lead and was like, you know what? All right, y'all have electrology. I'm going to do the rest of it. And so the book is really going to be start to talk about skin changes and when you're on hormones or if you've had surgery, what are the scars going to look like, that kind of stuff. And so working on that, it's with the editor now. So we're just kind of hashing that out. Um, and so, because there are some very real changes, especially for folks who are taking estrogen, any type of estrogen hormone replacement, regardless of whether you've had estrogen in your body before or not, is going to increase sensitivity. It is 100% like I have seen it in my practice. I have seen it in other people's practice. I've had people ask me that, and I'm like, yeah, it's going to increase over the course of 2 years, about 2 years to 2.5 years, things kind of level out. And so you will see an increase in sensitivity. So people are going to be jumping out of your chair a lot more, you know, even though, you're doing the same thing. I have one person I've had to turn my machine down probably a good 10, milliamperes just because they can't handle it anymore. So because we started when they started hormones, and now they're at about 2 years. And we're close to being done, but I'm like, you got to sit still or I'm going to like strap you to this chair. Uh, so that's just kind of, those are the types of things I don't think people also take into consideration, that the trans women's skin who are on HRT is going to be more oily. For trans men, it's going to be more rough over time, and the hair is going to become thicker. It's you know, those types of things. So, if you have any questions about that, I'm also more than happy to just answer those as well.
Do you have an estimated date for your book release?
No, not yet. This was something that kind of like one day I jokingly told a friend of mine, I was like, I had some free time, so I wrote a book. That was kind of like what this came about was I was sitting around one day being like, why is this not a thing here? And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm the one that's supposed to do that since it's in my mind. So I literally just finished it. It just went to the editor, who happens to randomly be in Brussels. I don't know how that works, but all right. So but yeah, I want to also make it really accessible. I am going to start a blog and everything that's going to have a lot of information so that we can actually move it forward. And I'm working on that now. So a lot of that information will come out as well. And there is a section on hair removal. So there is a section that focuses primarily on laser and electrolysis. And it does make the definitive statement that electrolysis is the gold standard because I feel like that statement has to be in writing somewhere. Um, I love laser. I do laser myself as well. I think it's great for some people. I have a laser, it's called E-Light. And so that also works on blonde hair and white hair. It does not work on red hair because nothing works on red hair, but it does work on that kind of stuff. So with folks that have a lot of peach fuzz, I see a lot of really great results with that. So which is primarily a lot of my cosmetic clientele. Like, I have all this hair, and I'm like, I'm not doing all that peach fuzz. I'm sorry. I don't have that much time or energy or a needle small enough, to be honest with you. So I was like, I don't think ballet makes a small enough needle for that. So you might as well just shave. But the reality is like, I love all of it, but there is, things like that. There are also things like thinning of skin. That's a huge one for people who have HRT, who are on HRT, especially specifically estrogen. Their skin thins out over time. And so things like microneedling and microchanneling are really great to build up that kind of, I don't want to say scar tissue, even though that's what the collagen tissue. So it is there. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at in terms of like, we're just now editing it. There's some things I just thought about that I need to add as well. So I'll send you all an advanced copy.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be so great. Well, we have like 10 minutes left of mentorship hour. Does anybody want to turn their camera on or not, unmic or not, and ask some questions in the chat? Patricia, I'm so excited for all the stuff that you're doing.
Yeah.
I think I got to meet you last year in person, but I've
Mhm.
seen you online and that kind of stuff. And I just remember like being like, okay, I I see you. So I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing, because it is hard work making new standards.
Mhm.
And there needs to be standards.
Yeah. And I agree. The two of you, I actually have followed the two of you for a very long time, even before I went to school, because I was like, what is this all about? Because I knew nothing about electrology. And you're Italian, and so I was like, okay, I'm full, like my father is full-blooded Italian, and like I always tell my clients the white hairs as they get older, they're called streganona hair.
Streganona, yes.
Yeah, like, and I don't know, that's just always something that popped in my head, because I think I saw you post about it one time, and I was like, oh my God, my grandmother says that. But yeah, so those are the like,
It means witch grandma for those who don't speak
oh,
Italian.
sorry. And
What is-
it's what they call the little like white, wiry hair that
Yeah.
grow out of like the nose or whatever. So
Yeah. They grow from the deep-seated part of your soul is what they grow from. Well, I hold on, I see that there's something in the chat, so I'm just going to double check this.
Patricio, are you coming to the seminar this year?
I can't this year. I actually was planning on it, and unfortunately, I have to stay here in Hawaii. So we
Okay.
are.
Adulting is the worst.
I know. Well, I have a couple of job interviews, and my fear is I'm going to actually get one of those jobs, and it will start at that exact same time because it's within the next couple of weeks, and I'm like, ugh. So
Okay.
I wish you could do it online though. That would be a really great thing for next year.
Well, we are going to be filming it and so releasing it after that. So there's not every single topic, because some things are just going to be like Q&A that are better on site. But I think the four main lectures are going to be recorded. So
Now that all might change too. I may come. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But yeah,
okay,
the
maybe
plan
a
right now
surprise visit. We'll take it.
yeah, is no, but it might be.
My
Okay.
little Jack in a Box. Melissa said, thank you for the information. Glad you work on individual clients. My aunt lives near Hilo, and I referred her to you via me. My aunt will be so excited you will be traveling to provide service.
Yes, I don't know exactly when we're going to be doing that. But yes, Hilo is one of our big places because we have a partner organization there too. So, and Hilo's so cute. I love Hilo. Hilo is a very small town. Like it's a very small, like, I don't know how to just, it's a small town. Like, it's a very rural small town. And Kona is kind of a small city, if that makes sense. So Hilo's got like a cute little main street and some parks and stuff like that. And Kona is where they run the what do you call that? Iron Man there. So yeah, but they're both like oceanside, so they're super cute.
It's funny because when I moved to a small town, and Joanie, when she came out here last year, she's like, you're insane. But when I moved to a small town, the whole reason I wanted to be accessible to everybody. An hour and a half is an easy drive for many people, but then I'm also on the train route. And the biggest thing is like people think it's like the locals are like, and the local queer community, our community, are like, I cannot believe you opened a gender affirming clinic in a 17,000 person town. Are you insane? And it's like, probably, but we exist everywhere. You know,
Right.
gender expansive people are struggling to find access to care. And when you move, it's expensive. I moved to a smaller town for 2 reasons: cost efficiency, so the school could get going and the clinic could. And 2, there was nobody here to help.
Right.
And that's like the fact that you're like, we're going to make this mobile. I think that that's so cool. I love like the thought of like a little bus electrolysis clinic. What are those, the sprinters?
Yeah, so we're trying to figure out, so they do have actual mobile medical units that they make. They're very expensive, but we're also trying to figure out how to do it in a way that doesn't require us to have a gas generator. So we're trying to do solar power as well, because we want to be sustainable, of course. That's one of our big things here, is that we don't buy anything new. So all of the sheets that go on our tables and stuff like that are all, we bought them from Savers. They're all like Care Bears and fun things. So and just because we don't want to create any more waste than we really have to. So I always joke that I'm going to take the gold needles and melt them down and sell the bars.
I think they're just coated, so it might be harder than you think.
Well, I the hole
Start
that little
scraping
mini
them.
bar is going to create.
I actually put together a full business plan to do a mobile unit out of my office once, just
Right.
just for fun. But it's like 50 or 60 pages. But I went through, like, priced everything, thought about like how the design would be. So I'm actually going to be interested to see what you do. So
Yeah.
I'm going to be interested in see what we do too, because it's kind of one of the things, I have never done it. Like, I purchased mobile medical units during COVID. That was one of my big tasks, was to find one. I found it. It came ready. But I think we're gonna buy like a old box truck and throw
Yeah.
some solar panels on it and
see what
figure out
happens.
some running water, and that's it.
Do they just ferry it back and forth?
No. So we'll leave it on
Oh,
Big Island. Yeah.
got it.
We used to
Like-
have a ferry, but they closed it. The shipping company here basically sued them enough that they had to close down. I don't know. It was
Just so everybody knows what was imagining in my head, I was like, oh, Patricia's going to be literally in a jet boat with an electrolysis. I know,
we've actually thought that through too. We actually thought about buying a boat.
You're just like this doing electrolysis.
I mean, you can
So
work
nauseous.
with it.
Oh my God, it's so bad.
Thinking about it.
Uh,
Okay, well, I guess if that's it, then we'll just kind of say thank you so much for your time, Patricio, honestly, and that you're doing some great things, and hopefully we'll touch base maybe in a year and see where you're at.
yeah.
We'll see. Who knows?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me, and we'll keep you up to date on.
Yeah, please do.
If anyone wants to move to Hawaii,
I mean, I want to, but
we need
let's just-
electrologists. You can't come to Oahu. You have to go to another island, but we'll help you find a place.
There you go.
like there's this little hut.
I mean, we have houses everywhere. It's fine.
All right, well, thank you, and we'll see everybody next week. for
Bye,
our
everybody.
Leadership
Thank
Hour.
you, Patricio.
Yeah, thank you.